The chilly autumn breeze gently rattled the windows as I sat by my worn wooden desk, organizing photos for my latest overseas assignment. My cottage, tucked neatly beside the iconic lighthouse in Evercrest Bay, was quiet save for the distant rhythmic crashing of waves against the rocky shore. The scent of salt and damp wood filled the air, a comforting reminder that I was finally home. My phone buzzed, startling me slightly. Glancing at the screen, my heart dropped. Victor's name glowed ominously. My stepfather rarely called without some agenda or complaint, and instinctively, my stomach knotted. I hesitated, staring at the glowing screen, my mind racing through countless unpleasant scenarios. Gathering courage, I answered, trying to keep my voice calm. "Hello, Victor." His voice came through disturbingly cheerful, instantly setting my nerves on edge. "Caroline, I have wonderful news," he announced proudly, almost gloating. A chill ran down my spine as I braced for whatever unpleasant surprise lay ahead. "I've sold the cottage by the lighthouse," he declared casually, as though discussing the weather. My breath caught sharply, disbelief surging through me. "What did you just say?" I asked, hoping I'd misunderstood. "The cottage," Victor repeated impatiently, irritation slipping into his voice. "I sold it. It's done. Honestly, Caroline, you're never around anyway, always flying off somewhere for your photography nonsense. I figured you'd appreciate the money more." His smug laughter echoed bitterly in my ears. My fingers tightened around the phone, anger bubbling up within me. That cottage wasn't merely a building, it was my sanctuary, filled with memories of my mother, afternoons spent reading by the fireplace, and evenings with my best friend Emma. Victor knew precisely how much that place meant to me, and yet he treated it like disposable property. "You had no right to sell it," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "That cottage isn't yours alone to sell." Victor's laughter faded abruptly. "Oh, please spare me the dramatics," he scoffed dismissively. "It's just an old shack. Besides, I needed quick cash to settle a few debts. Gambling's been a little rough lately, you know." He paused, waiting for me to sympathize, but I stayed silent. "Listen," he continued patronizingly, "it's done. Just accept it and move on." My head spun, disbelief mixing with outrage. "I don't accept it," I responded sharply. "You cannot legally sell that cottage without my consent, and you definitely can't sell it without Emma's." A tense silence followed, broken only by Victor's irritated sigh. "You think you're so clever, Caroline? Always the stubborn one," he snapped. "Fine. Play your little legal games. But it's too late. The paperwork's already signed." He hung up abruptly, leaving me trembling with fury and helplessness. I sat frozen for several minutes, phone clutched tightly, staring numbly at the empty fireplace. Memories flooded back, the sound of waves during stormy nights, long conversations with Emma over tea, and my mother's warm laughter resonating through the cozy rooms. The cottage was more than just a house. It was an integral part of my identity, my refuge from a chaotic world. I couldn't simply let Victor rob me of something so precious. Resolving to take control, I immediately dialed Emma. Her bright voice greeted me cheerfully, oblivious to the storm brewing within me. "Hey, Caroline. You're finally back home?" she asked, excitement clear in her voice. "Emma, we have a serious problem," I blurted out, unable to hide my agitation. "Victor sold our cottage without telling either of us. He said it was to cover his gambling debts." The silence on the other end was deafening, punctuated only by Emma's sharp intake of breath. "He did what?" she finally whispered, disbelief coloring her tone. "He can't do that. We have a co-ownership agreement." "Exactly," I confirmed urgently. "We have to act fast. Can you find our ownership documents? I'll call my lawyer first thing tomorrow morning." Emma's voice steadied, her resolve clear. "I'm on it," she assured me. "Don't worry, Caroline. We're going to fight this together. Victor thinks he can bully us, but he has no idea who he's dealing with." Relief surged through me, her strength bolstering mine. "Thank you, Emma. I'll be home soon, and we can face him head-on." As I ended the call, determination replaced the initial shock and fury. Victor had underestimated me for the last time. If he thought I would quietly accept his betrayal, he was gravely mistaken. This cottage was more than wood and stone. It was my life, my strength, and my sanctuary. and I was ready to fight with everything I had to reclaim it. My journey home to Evercrest Bay felt longer than usual. Each mile seemed to stretch endlessly, filled with worry and frustration. The news of Victor's betrayal replayed repeatedly in my mind, and despite my best efforts to distract myself, I couldn't shake off the anger simmering beneath my surface. Finally, as I drove down the familiar winding coastal road, the outline of the lighthouse came into view, its comforting beacon cutting through the gathering evening mist. My cottage sat nestled nearby, welcoming yet somehow vulnerable under the weight of recent events. Emma was already there, standing on the porch waiting for me, arms folded protectively against the crisp evening air. Her warm presence was instantly calming. I parked hastily and rushed towards her, the relief in her eyes mirroring my own. "Thank goodness you're here," she said, hugging me tightly. "I found all the documents. They're inside on the kitchen table." Stepping into the cottage felt strangely unfamiliar, as though Victor's actions had already begun to erase my presence here. Determined not to let that happen, I moved swiftly to the kitchen, gathering the paperwork. The co-ownership agreement was clearly laid out, specifying the need for both our signatures to authorize any sale. "He knew this," Emma said bitterly, pointing to our signatures. "He blatantly disregarded it." "I spoke briefly to my lawyer Karen on the drive," I informed her, arranging the documents carefully. "She suggested we first confirm with the local property office to ensure no formal transfer has been registered yet." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "We should also check with the real estate agents in town. Someone must have been involved." The next morning, under a pale autumn sky heavy with clouds, Emma and I began our quest for answers. We first visited the town's property office, where the clerk, Mr. Harris, greeted us warmly before turning serious at our inquiries. He searched meticulously through recent records, shaking his head as he reviewed them. "I don't see any recent transfers involving your cottage," he confirmed, looking up sympathetically. "Whoever tried selling it hasn't legally finalized it yet." Our next stop was the office of Evercrest Realty. The receptionist quickly directed us to Sarah Mitchell, the agent who had reportedly handled Victor's transaction. Sarah, young and visibly uncomfortable, immediately apologized upon realizing the gravity of the situation. "Victor assured me he had full ownership," she explained nervously, avoiding eye contact. "I should have double-checked. I'm truly sorry." "It's not entirely your fault," I assured her, trying to maintain composure despite the fury within. "But we'll need your cooperation fully documented if this escalates." She nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. I'll provide everything you need." With each step, my resolve strengthened, slowly replacing the anxiety and confusion I had initially felt. Victor believed he could bulldoze his way through my life without consequence. However, he had severely underestimated me, thinking I'd quietly surrender to his manipulation. Now, armed with evidence and solidified by support from Emma and the townspeople, I felt powerful, ready to reclaim what was rightfully mine. That evening, Emma and I sat by the fireplace in my cottage, sipping warm tea and reviewing the gathered documents. The fire crackled gently, casting flickering shadows around the cozy room. "What's next?" Emma asked quietly, her voice calm but determined. "Are we confronting Victor directly, or will Karen handle it?" I stared thoughtfully at the flames, weighing our options carefully. Confronting Victor directly might feel satisfying in the moment, but it risked letting him manipulate emotions once again. "Let's let Karen handle it legally," I finally said, determined. "Victor expects me to confront him personally. This time we'll catch him off guard." Emma nodded approvingly. "You're right. He's counting on your emotional reaction to control the narrative. Let's use logic and law instead." "He won't see that coming." I smiled faintly, feeling a rush of gratitude for Emma's unwavering support. That night, alone in my bedroom, I carefully composed a detailed email to Karen, attaching all relevant documents and evidence we gathered. After sending it, I sat by my window, gazing out towards the lighthouse, its reassuring glow cutting steadily through the darkness. This place, this cottage, was mine not only by right of law but by heart and memory. Victor had tried to tear away something deeply personal, but he had unknowingly awakened my resolve instead. Sleep came slowly that night, filled with turbulent dreams, but also an underlying sense of confidence I hadn't felt in years. As the dawn broke gently over Evercrest Bay, spreading its golden warmth across the water, I knew this battle had only just begun. Yet, unlike before, I now stood ready to fight with clarity and determination, prepared to reclaim my sanctuary no matter the challenge ahead. The following days passed swiftly, a blur of carefully crafted strategies and tense anticipation. Karen quickly responded, scheduling a formal meeting to discuss the next legal steps. The air felt charged when Emma and I walked into her law office, a small but professional space located in the center of Evercrest Bay. Bookshelves filled with thick legal volumes lined the walls, conveying an aura of authority and calm. Karen greeted us warmly, her steady presence reassuring. We sat across from her heavy oak desk as she laid out various papers neatly. "We have a strong case," she began confidently, adjusting her reading glasses. "The documents you provided clearly show Victor acted fraudulently. He had no legal authority to sell your shared property without mutual consent." Emma shifted slightly in her seat, clearly eager for resolution. "What's our immediate course of action?" she asked sharply, eyes fixed intently on Karen. "We issue a formal cease and desist notice first," Karen explained patiently. "This letter will explicitly state Victor's legal violation and demand he immediately halt any further attempts to transfer ownership of the cottage." I took a deep breath, absorbing her words. "And if he doesn't comply?" "Then," Karen said firmly, leaning forward slightly, "we escalate the matter to local authorities. Victor could face serious charges, including fraud and attempted theft." The gravity of Karen's words hung heavily between us, but her assurance was exactly what I needed. Emma reached over, squeezing my hand gently. "We're prepared to do whatever it takes," Emma said decisively. Karen nodded approvingly, beginning to draft the cease and desist letter immediately. Watching her precise, confident movements calmed my anxious heart. Victor had spent years skillfully manipulating situations and people, but finally, he was facing an opponent he couldn't outsmart with charm or deceit. The clear, unbiased force of the law. Once the letter was complete, Karen handed me a crisp envelope, sealed firmly. "Send this by certified mail today," she instructed carefully. "We'll create an official record that Victor received it. If he violates this notice, we'll have definitive proof for law enforcement." That afternoon, standing in the quiet post office of Evercrest Bay, envelope in hand, my pulse quickened. Emma stood silently beside me, a pillar of quiet strength. Sliding the letter across the counter to the postal clerk, I felt a surge of power and resolve. "Registered mail, please," I said firmly, watching as the clerk stamped and logged the envelope. It was done. Victor would soon know I wasn't backing down. 2 days later, Victor called. His name flashing on my phone screen sent a surge of anxiety mixed with defiance through my veins. This time, however, I felt prepared, even curious about his reaction. Answering calmly, I greeted him evenly, refusing to let emotion betray me. "Victor!" He immediately exploded, voice thick with anger. "What do you think you're playing at, Caroline? A cease and desist letter? Are you seriously threatening me?" His fury was palpable, but this time it only strengthened my resolve. "I'm not threatening anyone," I responded clearly, my voice steady. "I'm simply protecting what's legally mine." He scoffed bitterly. "Always the righteous one, aren't you? Do you have any idea what position you've put me in? The people I owe money to aren't exactly patient. I needed that money urgently. And so you decided to steal from me?" My voice sharpened slightly, anger flaring again despite my efforts to stay calm. "This cottage isn't just yours to sell. Emma and I co-own it legally. You broke the law." Victor's tone shifted abruptly, becoming softer, almost pleading. "Caroline, listen, let's handle this privately. There's no need to involve authorities. I'll find a way to fix it. I promise." The desperation in his voice caught me off guard momentarily. In the past, his pleading might have swayed me. But not this time. "The letter stands," I said firmly. "You have no right to negotiate something you never fully owned. I'm done letting you manipulate me." He paused, a long silence filled with heavy breathing on his end. Finally he spoke, his voice cold and cutting. "You're making a huge mistake, Caroline." "No," I replied steadily. "I made a mistake by trusting you. This," I continued sharply, "is me finally correcting that." The call ended abruptly, and I exhaled deeply, heart pounding. Emma placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You did perfectly," she said quietly. He's realizing he can't control you anymore. Her words resonated deeply within me. Victor had built his power by manipulating my doubts and fears. But now, I stood confidently, reclaiming control of my life step by step. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely empowered, fully capable of facing whatever came next. That evening, Emma and I stood outside the cottage, watching as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, the lighthouse beam cutting steadily through the deepening dusk. "Whatever happens now," Emma said softly, "you've already won something far more valuable than the cottage itself. You've found your strength." I nodded quietly, feeling an inner peace settling gently over me. The fight wasn't over yet. Victor would certainly respond, possibly escalate his tactics further. But I was ready, resolved to protect my sanctuary at all costs. The cottage wasn't just a building. It represented my identity, my independence, and the strength I had finally reclaimed. The days following Victor's furious call passed with a quiet tension that hung thickly in the air. Emma stayed at the cottage, offering steady support as we waited for Victor's next move. I busied myself organizing my photography collection, trying to find solace in the familiar rhythm of sorting through images of distant lands and peaceful landscapes. Yet, despite my attempts at distraction, an uneasy feeling lingered, a premonition that Victor wouldn't simply surrender quietly. On a brisk Wednesday afternoon, a knock echoed firmly against the cottage door, startling Emma and me from our quiet conversation by the kitchen table. Opening it cautiously, I found Detective Andrew Keller standing patiently on my porch, his face stern yet kind. "Miss Foster," he greeted me politely. "I'm Detective Keller, Evercrest Bay Police Department. May I come in?" I stepped aside quickly, inviting him into the warmth of the cottage. Emma rose to greet him, exchanging a cautious glance with me. We led him to the living room, where he took a seat, pulling out a small notebook. "Your lawyer contacted our department regarding the fraudulent property sale," he began calmly, carefully observing our reactions. "We started a preliminary investigation, and some details have surfaced that I'd like to discuss with you." My heart quickened, nervous anticipation building within me. "What have you found, Detective?" I asked, voice steady despite my inner turmoil. Detective Keller cleared his throat gently. "It appears Victor approached multiple buyers attempting to sell your cottage urgently, offering it well below market value. He cited personal debts and pressing circumstances to convince buyers. Most potential buyers refused once they sensed something was off, but one, Franklin Hart, a local business owner, agreed to the purchase." I recognized the name Franklin Hart instantly. He owned a successful seafood restaurant on the harbor front, well known and respected within the community. Why would someone like him risk involvement in such a dubious transaction? "Has Mr. Hart completed any paperwork or transferred payment?" Emma asked sharply, breaking my train of thought. "Only partially," Detective Keller replied calmly. "He provided a deposit but paused the full payment upon hearing your cease and desist order. It seems Mr. Hart was unaware of any co-ownership. He believed Victor's claim of sole ownership." Emma exhaled deeply, visibly relieved. "So the sale isn't finalized?" she asked, hope creeping into her voice. "Correct," Keller confirmed reassuringly. "The transaction remains incomplete and legally invalid. Mr. Hart is willing to cooperate fully with us, and he's understandably upset by Victor's deceit." Detective Keller paused, clearly considering his next words carefully. "There's another matter, however, that I believe you should know," he continued cautiously. "Our initial inquiries into Victor's gambling debts uncovered some concerning connections. He's deeply indebted to individuals with known criminal affiliations, making his situation quite desperate." My heart sank at Keller's revelation. I knew Victor's gambling was problematic, but criminal involvement was something I hadn't anticipated. Emma looked sharply at me, concern etched clearly in her eyes. "Do you think he's dangerous, Detective?" she asked quietly. Detective Keller shook his head slightly, reassuring us. "I don't believe Victor poses a direct physical threat to either of you," he explained carefully. "But he's increasingly desperate. We should remain vigilant. He might resort to more extreme measures to secure funds quickly." The detective's warning filled the room with palpable tension, a reality check of how serious the situation had become. After providing detailed statements and agreeing to maintain close contact with the authorities, Detective Keller left, promising to keep us updated promptly. After he departed, Emma and I sat silently, absorbing everything we just learned. The cottage, once our peaceful retreat, had become the center of an intense conflict, caught in Victor's reckless desperation. "Caroline," Emma began hesitantly, breaking the silence. "What if Victor tries something even more drastic next?" I met her concerned gaze, feeling the weight of her question deeply. "Then we remain prepared," I replied steadily, my voice calm yet firm. "We keep working closely with Detective Keller, Karen, and the authorities. Victor might have thought I would crumble easily, but I'm stronger now. I won't be intimidated." Emma's expression softened into admiration, offering a small, reassuring smile. "You're right," she affirmed gently. "We'll get through this together." As evening descended upon Evercrest Bay, darkness enveloping the cottage in comforting shadows, I reflected deeply on the events of the day. Victor's desperation was unsettling, yet knowing the truth gave me clarity. I'd spent years tolerating his manipulations, never fully confronting them. But now, facing the harsh reality head-on felt empowering, even freeing. Late that night, as waves crashed rhythmically against the rocky shore below, I stood on my porch, gazing toward the lighthouse. Its unwavering beacon swept steadily across the bay, illuminating the darkness. It felt symbolic, a constant reassurance in troubling times. Victor's deceit had tested my resilience, yet each challenge strengthened my resolve. The cottage remained mine, the beacon stood firm, and no matter how fierce the storm ahead, I knew I was ready to face it. As days turned into a restless week, Evercrest Bay's serene beauty provided little comfort amidst the growing storm surrounding Victor's betrayal. Each morning brought renewed anxiety, yet also reinforced my determination. Emma remained by my side, her unwavering friendship a source of quiet strength. Together, we meticulously documented every interaction, preparing for whatever Victor might attempt next. One particularly gray afternoon, as mist blanketed the bay, my phone vibrated sharply, startling me from reviewing legal notes. It was my mother's number, a call I'd anticipated with dread. Hesitantly, I answered, unsure of her intentions. "Hello, Mom." Her voice trembled slightly, clearly strained. "Caroline," she began cautiously, "Victor told me what's happening. He says you're ruining everything for him. Is this true?" I sighed deeply, frustration rising within me. Despite everything, a small part of me hoped she'd finally recognize Victor's manipulative ways. "He tried selling the cottage without my consent," I explained evenly, fighting to keep bitterness from my tone. "It's illegal, Mom. Emma and I have co-ownership. He knew this, but he still did it to pay off gambling debts." She paused, the line heavy with silence. Eventually, her voice lowered to a whisper, almost pleading. "Victor said he had no choice, that people were after him. Caroline, he's scared." Her words sent a pang of sadness and anger through me. Victor always managed to twist situations, playing victim to gain sympathy, even from those who should have known better. "Mom," I responded firmly, "Victor created this problem himself. His gambling addiction, his debts, these are not my responsibility. I won't let him destroy my life to fix his mistakes." Her breath caught audibly, a mix of sadness and resignation. "I understand," she whispered finally, her voice faint. "But please be careful. Victor's desperation frightens me. He's not thinking clearly anymore." The call ended softly, leaving me standing silently, staring at the gray sea beyond my window. Emma approached, having overheard enough to understand the situation. "Your mother still doesn't fully see," she murmured gently. I nodded quietly, sadness weighing heavily on me. "She's blinded by loyalty, I suppose. But we can't let Victor's desperation become ours." A soft knock broke our thoughtful silence, startling both of us. Opening the door cautiously, I found Franklin Hart standing awkwardly on my porch, nervously adjusting his hat. "Miss Foster," he greeted hesitantly, "I hope this isn't intrusive. May I speak with you briefly?" I invited him inside, curious and cautious. Emma joined us at the kitchen table, carefully observing. Franklin cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "I wanted to personally apologize," he began earnestly. "I had no idea the cottage had another owner. Victor assured me he had full rights. The moment I learned the truth, I froze all proceedings." His sincerity softened my guarded stance. "Thank you, Mr. Hart," I replied genuinely. "I appreciate your honesty and willingness to cooperate." He shifted nervously, glancing between us. There's something else you should know, he admitted reluctantly. Victor approached me again yesterday, desperately urging me to finalize payment immediately. He seemed frantic, scared. When I refused, he implied he'd find another buyer quickly, someone less concerned with legality. My heart quickened, realizing the extent of Victor's panic. Did he say who he'd approach next? Emma pressed urgently. Franklin shook his head regretfully. No, but the implication was unsettling. Possibly someone outside regular channels. A chill ran down my spine, fear mingling with anger. Victor's recklessness endangered everything, escalating into dangerous territory. Franklin stood, clearly uncomfortable, his voice gentle. If there's anything else I can do, please contact me immediately. I want no part in his schemes. After Franklin left, Emma and I exchanged troubled glances. Victor's spiraling, Emma stated firmly. We need Detective Keller involved now. We quickly contacted the detective, conveying Franklin's troubling revelation. Detective Keller listened attentively, his tone serious. Thank you both, he assured calmly. We'll monitor Victor closely. He's backed himself into a corner, and desperation could push him further. Remain cautious, and inform me immediately of any unusual incidents. As evening fell, Evercrest Bay grew eerily quiet, the lighthouse beam slicing steadily through gathering darkness. Victor's desperation had now breached into dangerous territory, threatening my peaceful life with shadows I'd hoped never to face. Emma sensed my tension, placing a comforting hand gently upon mine. We've faced worse, she whispered reassuringly. We'll endure this too. Despite her comforting words, sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, listening to the rhythmic crash of waves against rocks below, the lighthouse illuminating brief moments of calm within chaos. Victor's desperation had shattered my peace, forcing me to confront shadows of the past that I'd long avoided. Yet, as I stared into the darkened room, I knew I couldn't retreat now. Victor's shadows would never again control my life. I was determined to reclaim my sanctuary, no matter how fierce the battle ahead. The next morning arrived with a brooding sky, dark clouds threatening rain over Evercrest Bay. Emma and I awoke early, fueled by a restless energy that refused to be quieted. We spent the first hours organizing every piece of evidence. Copies of our co-ownership agreement, emails from Franklin, messages from Victor, and our notes from conversations with Detective Keller. By the time Karen arrived at the cottage, her umbrella dripping water onto the porch, we were prepared for anything. Karen's presence brought a sense of gravity to the day. She moved quickly, laying out a plan as we gathered around the kitchen table. Victor's actions are now firmly in criminal territory, she explained, her voice crisp with authority. We'll file a formal police report today, including Franklin's testimony and all your documentation. The next step is requesting an injunction from the county court to freeze any further attempts to sell or transfer the cottage. Emma listened intently, nodding in agreement. We need to send a clear message that Victor's manipulation ends here. Karen produced a thick file of forms and affidavits, guiding us through the process. As we worked, my phone vibrated again, displaying a message from an unknown number. The words chilled me. You're making this very difficult. You'll regret it if you keep pushing. I handed the phone to Karen, whose face darkened as she read the message. This is intimidation, she stated, documenting the message for police evidence. It only strengthens your case, Caroline. Stay calm and do not reply. We spent the afternoon at the police station, where Detective Keller met us in his office. He reviewed the file, his jaw set with determination. This is exactly what we need, he affirmed, making copies for the official record. We'll interview Franklin today and bring Victor in for questioning if he makes another move. Karen accompanied us to the county courthouse. The judge listened gravely to our petition, his eyes scanning the documents. After a tense pause, he granted the injunction, issuing an immediate freeze on any actions involving the cottage until the dispute was resolved. Relief washed over me. For the first time since Victor's betrayal, I felt the law fully on my side. Emma smiled, squeezing my shoulder. He can't touch it now, she whispered. He's lost his leverage. As dusk descended, painting the bay in deep blues and purples, we returned to the cottage. The lighthouse's beam swept the horizon, steady and unwavering, a symbol of endurance in the gathering storm. That evening, as we shared tea by the fire, Emma's confidence was infectious. This was the right move, Caroline. No more secrets. No more waiting for Victor's next attack. Now he'll have to answer to the truth. Her words soothed my battered nerves. I knew Victor wouldn't give up easily. His desperation and pride ran deep. But I also knew the strength of the allies around me. With Karen and Detective Keller's support, Emma's loyalty, and the law's protection, the tide was finally turning. Before sleep, I paused at the window, watching rain streak down the glass, the lighthouse's glow unwavering against the dark. My sanctuary was not yet restored, but for the first time, hope felt stronger than fear. The legal battle was just beginning, but I was ready to see it through, no matter the cost. The rain continued through the night, drumming steadily against the roof, filling the cottage with a sense of tense anticipation. By morning, the storm outside seemed to have seeped into my thoughts. I tried to keep busy, straightening bookshelves and wiping the fog from the windows, but unease clung to me stubbornly. Emma, ever vigilant, brewed coffee and checked her phone for updates from Karen or Detective Keller. We were determined not to let Victor catch us off guard, but neither of us could ignore the mounting tension. Just before noon, a loud knock rattled the cottage door, jolting both of us upright. I opened it to find Victor standing on the porch, his appearance disheveled and eyes wild with a mixture of anger and panic. He barely waited for an invitation, pushing past me into the living room. "You think you're clever, Caroline," he spat, voice quivering with resentment. "You think the law can protect you from everything?" Emma stepped forward, standing between us. "You need to leave, Victor. The court has issued an injunction. If you attempt anything further, you'll be arrested." Victor scoffed, glaring at both of us. "You always hid behind rules and friends. What about family? What about loyalty?" His voice cracked, the desperation unmistakable. "I have nothing left. Do you understand? I've lost everything because of you." I steadied my breathing, refusing to let his theatrics shake my resolve. "You lost everything because of your own choices," I replied evenly. "Emma and I are only protecting what is rightfully ours. You broke the law. Now you have to answer for it." He stared at me, jaw clenched, searching for any trace of sympathy. Finding none, he swung his gaze to Emma, then back to me. "You'll regret this," he muttered, his voice nearly a whisper. "I promise you both, you'll regret it." Before I could respond, Emma had already dialed Detective Keller. Calmly but firmly, she relayed Victor's trespass and threats. "He's here now, threatening us in person," she reported, her eyes never leaving Victor. Within minutes, Detective Keller's patrol car arrived, the blue and red lights reflecting off wet pavement. Victor's bravado faltered as the officer approached. "Mr. Hargrove, you're violating a court order," Detective Keller announced. "You need to leave this property immediately and cooperate with the ongoing investigation." Victor attempted a last, pleading glance in my direction, but I held his gaze, unflinching. There would be no more second chances, no more room for manipulation. As the detective firmly escorted him off the property, I closed the door behind them, the cottage suddenly feeling both emptier and safer. Emma wrapped her arms around me, both of us shaking slightly in the aftermath. "You did the right thing," she whispered, her voice full of relief and pride. "You stood your ground." That night, I struggled to find rest. The house was quiet, but my mind replayed every word, every threat, every desperate look in Victor's eyes. I knew this confrontation wasn't the end. Victor was unpredictable, and desperation could make anyone dangerous. Yet, for the first time, I felt the boundary between us was no longer blurred by guilt or fear. As dawn crept over Evercrest Bay, the lighthouse beams slowly faded into morning light. I stood by the window, watching the clouds slowly drift apart, wondering what Victor's next move would be. One thing, however, was certain. The days of living in his shadow were over. No matter what came next, I was ready to face it, with courage, with allies, and with a heart finally reclaiming its peace. The following days unfolded with a peculiar sense of calm, as if Evercrest Bay itself was holding its breath. Victor's forced removal had sent a clear message, and for the first time since his betrayal, Emma and I experienced the cottage as our own again. No longer a battleground, but a haven slowly reclaiming its warmth. Yet beneath the stillness, uncertainty simmered. We knew Victor's desperation had not been extinguished. It had merely been forced underground. Karen checked in daily, updating us on the investigation and the court's progress. Detective Keller also increased patrols around the cottage, his presence both comforting and unsettling, a reminder that danger still lingered at the edges of our newfound peace. Emma and I focused on repairing what Victor's chaos had shaken. We fixed loose window panes, swept leaves from the porch, and baked bread to fill the house with comforting scents, reclaiming the routines that made the cottage truly ours. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Karen called with urgent news. Victor has been formally charged with fraud, attempted theft, and intimidation, she reported, her tone edged with both relief and seriousness. He's been served a summons to appear in court next week. The evidence is strong, especially with Franklin's testimony and the documented threats. The news landed like a heavy stone dropped into a still pond. Emma embraced me tightly, her face shining with hope. He's finally going to be held accountable, Caroline. This nightmare might truly be ending. Despite the relief, a new anxiety surfaced. The prospect of facing Victor in court, of reliving every bitter exchange and exposing our pain before strangers, was daunting. Yet I knew it was necessary, not only to protect the cottage, but to defend the boundaries I had worked so hard to build. That night, I found myself drawn to the porch, the salty wind tugging at my hair as I gazed out at the unwavering lighthouse beam. Emma joined me, 2 mugs of tea in hand. We sat in silence for a long while, listening to the distant sound of waves. "You're stronger than you think," Emma finally murmured, her voice gentle. "No matter what happens in that courtroom, you've already won something Victor can never take." I squeezed her hand, grateful beyond words for her presence. The fear and shame that once defined my relationship with Victor were fading, replaced by a quiet courage. For the first time, I allowed myself to imagine a future unshadowed by his manipulation. A future shaped by my choices, my friendships, and the peace I found within these walls. As we finished our tea, the lighthouse's light swept over us, illuminating the porch in a soft, steadfast glow. I closed my eyes, letting its calm strength fill me. The tide was turning at last, and I was ready to meet whatever the coming days would bring. The day of the hearing arrived with a heavy gray sky blanketing Evercrest Bay. The courthouse, usually quiet and dignified, buzzed with tense anticipation as Emma and I arrived, accompanied by Karen. Detective Keller was waiting at the entrance, offering a reassuring nod. Franklin Hart was already inside, reviewing his statement with a court officer. My heart thudded with anxiety, but a deep resolve steadied my steps. This was the moment when truth would be spoken plainly, and I would no longer hide from confrontation. Inside, the courtroom felt both intimate and overwhelming. Victor sat at the defendant's table, hands clenched, his gaze fixed stubbornly on the floor. He looked smaller than I remembered, his arrogance replaced by a twitchy, restless fear. As proceedings began, the judge, stern but fair, listened carefully as Karen laid out the case, presenting every document, every message, and every testimony in meticulous order. Emma testified first, describing Victor's attempts to intimidate and deceive us, her voice unwavering and clear. Franklin followed, apologizing for his unwitting role and confirming Victor's misrepresentations. When it was my turn, I drew a steady breath, recounting the pain, confusion, and violation I felt at Victor's betrayal. I described the meaning of the cottage, not as a mere asset but as the heart of my life, a place of memories and hope nearly destroyed by one man's recklessness. Victor's attorney tried to cast doubt, suggesting misunderstandings or family disputes, but the evidence was overwhelming. Karen countered every point calmly, never losing her focus. Detective Keller's testimony about Victor's threats and desperate attempts to circumvent the law sealed the argument. The judge listened intently, occasionally pausing to ask clarifying questions, his gaze resting longest on Victor when the threats and intimidation were discussed. As the morning wore on, I watched Victor crumble under the weight of his own decisions. Gone was the smug manipulator. What remained was a man cornered by his actions, unable to charm or bluster his way free. The prosecution's closing statement echoed in the silent room. This is not simply a matter of property, but of trust, dignity, and the right to feel safe in one's own home. The judge called a recess before issuing his decision. Emma and I waited outside, hands clasped tightly. The courthouse steps were cold, but I felt a strange lightness inside. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth aloud, unafraid. Whatever the outcome, Victor's power over me was broken. The courtroom was merely the final stage, A place where the world could finally see what I had long endured in silence. When the recess ended, we filed back into the courtroom, bracing for the verdict. The battle that had begun with a single phone call was about to reach its resolution, and I was ready, heart pounding but steady, to accept whatever came next. The judge returned to the bench, his face unreadable as the courtroom settled into expectant silence. Emma squeezed my hand tightly, her strength echoing in the unspoken promise that whatever happened, we would face it together. Victor glanced up nervously, his bravado gone, looking for any sign of mercy. I met his eyes briefly, not with anger, but with the calm certainty of someone who had finally reclaimed her voice. The judge began, his tone grave and deliberate, recounting the facts established during the hearing. He cited the evidence of co-ownership, the unlawful attempt to sell the cottage, the threats and intimidation, and the corroborating statements from Franklin and Detective Keller. It is the finding of this court, he concluded, that Victor Hargrove committed fraud, attempted theft, and intimidation. The property sale is void, and all rights of ownership remain with Caroline Foster and Emma Thompson. Furthermore, restitution for legal fees is ordered, and a restraining order is issued to ensure the ongoing safety of the plaintiffs. A wave of relief swept through me so intense that I nearly lost my balance. Emma hugged me tightly, tears of exhaustion and joy springing to both our eyes. Even Franklin, sitting quietly in the back, offered a small, respectful nod. For the first time since Victor's betrayal, it felt as though the world itself had taken our side. Victor slumped in his seat, his shoulders sagging under the full weight of the court's decision. There were no protests, no angry outbursts, just a resigned silence as the judge's words echoed through the room. He was escorted from the courthouse, no longer a looming threat but simply a man finally held accountable for his choices. Karen approached us with a smile of quiet triumph. "You did it, Caroline," she said warmly. "You stood up for yourself, and the law stood with you." Outside the courthouse, Detective Keller shook my hand and congratulated Emma and me on our strength. "Many never make it this far," he remarked. "You've set a precedent, not just for property, but for dignity and self-respect." As we left the courthouse, sunlight broke through the clouds, casting golden light over Evercrest Bay. The air felt lighter, the world somehow renewed. Emma and I walked home together, our steps buoyed by hope and freedom. The cottage, our haven, waited for us on the hill, steadfast and welcoming as ever. That evening, we celebrated quietly by the fireplace, a simple meal and laughter filling the space once haunted by anxiety. I gazed around the familiar rooms, feeling the cottage breathe again, no longer weighed down by uncertainty and fear. The ordeal had left scars, but it had also restored something irreplaceable. My belief in my own strength, the security of true friendship, and the enduring peace of a home rightfully defended. As night fell and the lighthouse shone steadily over the bay, I let myself imagine the future again. The battle for my sanctuary was over, and I had emerged whole, not despite the struggle, but because of it. The days after the verdict passed in gentle, almost surreal tranquility. For the first time in months, the cottage truly felt like a sanctuary again. The air was clearer, the walls brighter, as if the house itself was grateful to be free from the weight of conflict. Emma and I spent the first morning planting wildflowers along the path to the porch, letting laughter and the simple rhythm of shared work fill the space that had so recently echoed with tension. Neighbors stopped by, some with baked goods, others with quiet congratulations. Word of the court's decision had spread quickly through Evercrest Bay, and each friendly visit reinforced a feeling of belonging I hadn't realized I'd missed. Franklin dropped off a basket of fresh seafood, his humble apology now replaced with camaraderie. Even Detective Keller made a final visit, promising that the authorities would keep Victor's restraining order firmly in place. In the evenings, Emma and I returned to old rituals. Tea by the fire, stories swapped across the kitchen table, sometimes falling into comfortable silence as dusk descended. The lighthouse beam sweeping the bay was no longer a symbol of warning, but of hope, steady, unwavering, always guiding us home. As weeks slipped into months, the marks of conflict faded, replaced by new memories. We painted the kitchen a cheerful yellow, repaired the old fence at the edge of the property, and filled the garden with blooms that flourished under our care. Every nail hammered, every flower planted, felt like another piece of myself reclaimed. I resumed my photography projects with new energy, capturing the subtle beauty of Evercrest Bay, the light on the water, the faces of friends, the joy of ordinary moments. Sometimes, echoes of Victor's betrayal returned in dreams or sudden moments of reflection, but they no longer had power over me. The fear and uncertainty had given way to resilience. I understood now that true peace did not come from never facing storms, but from finding strength within myself to endure and rebuild. On a clear spring morning, Emma and I stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over the sea. She squeezed my shoulder, her eyes shining with pride. "We did it, Caroline. You found your way home." I smiled, the truth of it settling warmly in my heart. The cottage, our home, was safe, not because conflict would never return, but because I had learned to stand my ground. With Emma's friendship and the steadfast support of my community, I knew I could weather any storm. The lighthouse's beam swept across the bay one last time as I raised my camera, ready to capture the first light of a new chapter. One defined not by fear, but by hope, belonging and hard-won peace.